interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press.
We interrupt our program to bring you a special broadcast.
We interrupt this program to bring you a news bulletin from
News is all around us all the time. But how many of us really know how and why news is the way it is?
Eric Newton is a reporter turned historian working for the museum just outside our nation's capital. He says the news has been shaped by at least 3 key events, and maybe a 4th.
One would be the codification of the First Amendment. The rulers say, hey, you know, the press must be free, speech must be free, people should be able to worship the way they want, they should be able to protest, they should be able to petition the government if they have grievances, and that's the soul of democracy. A second really big development was the telegraph, also here in America. Suddenly, something that happened on one side of the country could be in the newspaper on the other side of the country the very next day, or even the same day. But I have to go all the way to 1980 or so before I get to, in my mind, to something as global and as big as the First Amendment and the telegraph, and that's the cable news system, CNN. Because here now, for the first time, the whole world can watch something as it's happening. Now, we're right in the middle of the internet. And is it one of the major contributions? Or is it more like radio coming after the telegraph?
The state of journalism is in perhaps the greatest change in a century, maybe even longer.
Adam Clayton Powell III is no stranger to journalism. After working in radio and television broadcast news, he now is the Vice President for Technology and Programs for the Freedom Forum.
There is terrific information online, and there's false information online, there's deliberately misleading information online. All of the good and the bad that you find in the real world surfaces in some form on the internet, and that's going to continue. One of the problems that some people have is ascertaining what is true and what isn't true. One of the shorthands we have for that is to use brand names, New York Times, USA Today. You have some assurance that at least you know what their standards are. Even in the case of Matt Drudge, the much vilified, at least by journalists, Matt Drudge, he makes quite clear what his standards are, and that he is not the New York Times. And so you have a fairly explicit statement of what the ground rules are.
After tabloids invaded New York and, you know, various scandal mongering seemed to be at a high in the Roaring '20s, editors got together in the 1920s and said we should have something called a code of ethics. And so the modern code of ethics of journalism began.
The bedrock standards of journalism will apply to the internet. To the extent they don't, it becomes not journalism but information, and information can be very, very broad.
The German surrender decision was reported.
When radio first came out, the New York Times said it was never going to catch on. When television came out, the critics said it would never catch on. It was a fad. When the, you know, when the internet came out, people said it was a geek thing, and on and on and on throughout all of these developments. These things are tools, and we know they're going to change life. But how they change life depends on how we use them. And we don't know how we're going to use them until after we have tried it and used them, and then we see what happens.
The changes over the last 20 years at ILM have been dramatic. It's almost comparable in my mind to the change from the horse and buggy to the car. When we started Jurassic Park, as it's well known now, the dinosaurs were intended, whenever they walked across the frame, to be stop motion. And we were just going to use the computer to do a little motion blur, add that in. And ultimately, Dennis Murin, who was heading up the effects team here, said, I think if we push it hard enough, we can make dinosaurs in the computer. We were able to push it that much farther and got a dinosaur walking across the frame. And the whole world changed from that moment on. I mean, it just has never literally looked back.
I have been chosen.
We're in the process right now of looking at doing entirely digital features. Toy Story is an entirely digital feature, but Star Wars is also a digital feature. It also employs live-action actors. When digital is all there is, when we have left film behind, when the whole thing starts to really change, the concept of digital will go away. It'll just be a feature again. A couple of years ago, there was a lot of speculation about when are we going to bring Marilyn Monroe back to life. The truth is that all of us as individual humans bring a spark which is inimitable. And we may bring parts of Marilyn Monroe back to life, but to bring her in her entirety is impossible. The entire film industry is trying to come to grips with what digital and the whole process of digital means. Most recently, we've seen the movie makers looking at the whole issue around Napster and the lawsuit that's going on, and the fact that today it's songs, tomorrow it's movies, and they're going to be able to be downloaded instantly. There is such a set sense of how to make films, of how to distribute films, of how the system works. We all resist change, and this industry is no different than any other. I think that for a filmmaker from the old days, somebody like an Orson Welles or a D.W. Griffith, to step into the technology as it currently exists, it might be a fairly clumsy transition for them to try to make a film in this digital world right now. But as the tools become more friendly to filmmakers, it'll become a world which is actually easier for the filmmaker to do what they want to do and put the images on the screen. You have cameras out there which shoot both movies, such as they are, or still photos, same camera, in a digital format for $1,000. I mean, that's just brilliant. You take it home to your Macintosh and you edit it into your own movie. That's brilliant. That opens up the palette for artists of all kinds, of all ages. There's no question about it. And then you have, simultaneously, you have the internet building up and crying for content, crying for more films to come out. Certainly there's viability for someone to make their own little movie or big movie and find a venue for it. The extent to which somebody can make a living off of that is really the extent to which they can leverage it into something that has more power.